So welcome back everybody for our final session of the day. And this one is again a reflection, but from me, and it's really hopefully a way of making some resources available that had disappeared. So let's tell you a little bit about the Video for All project. And it's incredible to think that it's actually as long ago as it was now, because it was back in 2014-15 when a group of different organizations, again funded by the Erasmus Plus lifelong learning program, came together to look at identifying best practices for video use in language education. And as you can see from the collection of different logos there, we were very much a mixed bunch. The University of Warwick, I'm now retired, but I was working at the University of Warwick at the time, along with Steve Mann, who was in the Centre for English Language Teaching, and Russell Stannard, who was also in the Centre for English Language Teaching, and I was working in the Language Centre, because by profession I'm a French and Spanish teacher. Came together with some community groups, the Commune of Perugia in Italy, Pelican, which is an English language teachers education school based in Brno, and a fabulous filmmaker who at the time was actually living in Ethiopia, who was his logo is this green logo that you can see here, and then some other community groups and organizations came together to draw up this project. And essentially, as I say, our mission really was to pull together a set of language teaching practices and support also for using these practices with or through video. And we also looked to identify partners who could be associate partners of the project, so they weren't actually involved in the physical meetings or the project outputs in terms of actually having to submit reports and things, but they were invited to see what we were producing and to comment on it and inform it. And Filter, as I mentioned earlier, was one of those at Manchester Met with Carmen. So our mission, as I say, really was to spend the 2 years, and that was not 2 years full time by any means, it was just over a period of 2 years, to pull together innovative practices for teaching and learning languages that took account of the increased use of digital video. And at the time, really, we were ahead of the game a little bit, but we're also at a time when the development of the technologies was still quite tricky, and it was not an easy process. However, we did manage to build a website and to organize a set of practices. And this graphic that you've got in front of you shows you an important part of how we organized those practices into our website. The website was built in WordPress, and it was up and active for the duration of the project and for possibly about a year thereafter. And then, of course, the funding ran out. So the idea of this graphic here was that you could come to the website and you could say, I want to use video with a language focus. And you'd click on that button and it would show you all the language focused practices for use of video with examples of how to do them, and technologies you could use and things to look out for. Or for example, you could say, okay, I've got some primary students, they're working at A1 and I want them to improve their making skills, so you could use those 3 buttons and filter all the practices that we had in the database under the system, and you would find something useful. So the idea, as I say, really was to pull these things together in order to make current methodologies and ideas and innovative practice for teaching and learning languages clearer if you wish to take a digital video approach. So that was the idea, and as I say, when the website was up, that was all great, it was all working. However, as I say, that was not to be, but I am going to share those resources because we have found a way, or I have found a way of making sure that those resources don't disappear. So why was the focus video? And the focus was video specifically for these issues that were coming up time and time again. One of the problems with digital video is that most of the tools for creating digital video created proprietary video formats. So what that meant was you used a particular tool, you paid quite a hefty sum for a license to use that tool. It would help you create a video, and then you would end up with a video that could only be viewed if you had the license to that proprietary software. So that made video creation very expensive, and also not terribly sustainable, because if that software stopped working or the license could no longer be afforded by your institution, you'd lost all your resources. So that was one of the most hazardous ways to spend your time as an educator, to spend all that time creating something that then couldn't be reused and wasn't available. In most cases, practitioners expected video to be a specific file type, in the same way as your Word document ended .doc. They expected a video to end .mov or whatever it happened to be, and for that to be usable on any platform and shareable and viewable anywhere. Well, sadly, video doesn't work like that. Video in a digital format combines lots of information. It combines information about the device that the video is being made on, information about obviously the image input, the video film itself, information about the pace at which those images are shared and moved, and their orientation, information about the audio content and how that connects to the image content. So you haven't got a single file type, you've actually got a combination of lots and lots of information and how to play it back. And some of that information will only be usable or readable on certain devices. So, of course, in the early days when people were experimenting with video with their students, they may find that the student has completed a video that they could perhaps show you on their phone or on their own laptop, but then couldn't be shared and couldn't be seen easily by others. Other images, other issues rather, which very quickly became apparent was, how do you go about hosting your video content? Where do you put it? At the time, YouTube was still relatively new, and people were in the practice very commonly of taking video content from YouTube and trying to download it. And of course, that breaks copyright. So there were all sorts of potential legal issues with doing that sort of thing. So that next set of questions was crucial then to examine. How do we observe intellectual property, and how do we make sure that we're not infringing on people's intellectual property when they watch something online? Very tempting to borrow a copy of something to use it in your lesson, but in fact that wasn't how it should be used through YouTube. but also issues around creativity. You know, the idea was not just to be consumers of video. So what we wanted to do was to give ownership to students so that they could be inspired perhaps by something they'd seen on YouTube and create their own version. So we really needed to increase understanding. And that meant really that it would be very useful to have a community of practice, a way of networking to support the exchange of expertise, particularly internationally, because of course language education has that unique aspect that means that we need to consider not just our national context, but our international context. So all these headaches had to be thought about. We had to think about transcoding and the difficulty of making things available across different devices. The importance of access for those who perhaps had various issues, perhaps using screen readers, for example, on computers. The importance of remaining inclusive, the importance of recognizing contribution, and also that very useful factor, and Carmen mentioned this earlier, the importance of collecting analytics and usage data so that we could understand what people were looking for and what they found the most useful. So let me just come back one step, and I'm just going to, for a moment, stop my sharing, because what I want to do is to share some links in the chat. A few things for you to explore. So what we're going to do is first of all share an article that I wrote sort of coming out of Video for All. And this was on an aspect that was particularly close to my own heart for language education, an aspect of video creation called produçage. So it's an open access article. You can download it freely from that link. And produçage essentially is bringing together little bits of media and video and combining those for a particular purpose, in this case for education, language education. And unbeknown to myself, when I started to experiment with produçage as a way of creating open educational resources for language education, a colleague who I had never met at the time on the other side of the world in Australia was struggling with exactly the same issue in her efforts to make Korean learning more interesting and relevant to her cohort. So I was teaching French, she was teaching Korean. We decided to collaborate on this on this article. So you'll be able to see there if you download that article. I'm just going to get myself a drink. Excuse me 1 second. Right, my apologies. I'm back. So we looked at the challenges, and what we wanted to do was to send a very clear message about the importance of and the relevance of media, particularly video media, to language learning, and how in most cases our language learners were accessing media in the language that they wanted to learn through YouTube. But in fact, for us as practitioners, it was very difficult for us to frame that learning and to make that learning more effective because of the lack of understanding around how we as practitioners could create and generate things that were more useful. So we tried to explain that and give examples to hopefully help lead some policy discussions around how, in some cases, copyright was preventing useful resources and access to resources. Right. I'm going to share another link in the chat for you, and then I will show this as well for your, just to go through it with you on the screen. So let's just grab that link. And pop it into the chat for you. Right, so let's just have a little look at this document together. So one of the outputs of the Video for All project was a collection of typical teaching topics that you might want to reinforce perhaps in language education through the use of video. What you see here are the categories that we created, and then in each case an example of how we could see that working in a video use context. So you can see here, really, if you like, what you've got is an overview of all the different aspects of teaching that could be enhanced through video use. And what we then did was to pull together examples of what and how they were. And you can see in each of these there is a link. And that link goes to a quality controlled PDF. And this is just one example of the many PDFs that we generated. So at the top of the PDF, in each practice, you've got a link directly to the example hosted on YouTube, generally, sometimes on Vimeo, but generally on YouTube. A brief discussion, a brief description rather. The level of language approximately within that, or the level of language that this is most applicable for. Followed by some suggestions of how to use it. So what you've actually got in these links, and I will share now the link to, here we go, in the chat, to the folder that contains all of these PDFs. Are quick guides, really, if you like, to these different practices and how they might work for you. So I just want to give a few minutes, and I'm sure you'll be relieved not to hear me coughing, for everybody just to click on a few of those and take a little look, and perhaps in the chat give us some feedback. Okay, so I hope you've been able to locate a PDF that may be of use to you. Let's just share again in the chat a link here to the Video for All project space on Facebook. Obviously, this was set up back in 2014-15 when the project was live, but it is still a network. And you will be able to look at the various things that have been saved and shared there. Okay, and finally, great, I'm glad you found something useful. And bear in mind, clearly things have changed over time, as they will do. So some things have moved on, but not everything. Hopefully there's still useful pointers there. The next thing I'm going to do actually is share a video that I made for a project that happened after Video for All. And this was based at Warwick. It was called Vilti. And I'll share this with the audio so you can see what I contributed to that project. Right, so as you can see from the Vilti website here, there are lots of featured videos and resources and additional information around licensing. And this remix video is what I'm going to show you. So I will switch off my mic. So, teaching is a challenge due to many complex factors. Language teaching involves mediating international, cultural, ethical and technical challenges. Stormy seas indeed. This video is a remix to illustrate what we as language teachers face and how we can navigate challenges and embrace opportunities for learning offered by the open web.
This movie is about a war over ideas. The battleground is the internet. And I take that personally, because I was born at the exact same time as the internet. I was born on a small island off the west coast of Canada. My parents were trying to get away from the world, but like all kids, I wanted the opposite. I wanted to connect back. Luckily, the creators of the internet thought the same way.
This computer would talk to this computer, sending a message first to this computer and forward it on to this computer, thereby acting as a relay.
Millions of computers were connected and evolved into one perfect machine, designed for a single purpose: sharing information.
Some of the technical headaches we face when using video are the result of commercial interests protecting their property. I believe that current intellectual property laws are out of kilter with their intended purpose, and we need to advocate for greater digital wisdom for teachers and students.
Remixing the art, science, and knowledge of the world's culture is second nature to Brazilians, and now it's government policy.
Maneiro, hein? Muito bom, hein? Tá fechado, tá fechado.
Lawrence Lessig traveled to Brazil in 2004 for inspiration and imagined an alternative global copyright system, Creative Commons.
Creative Commons was born to set culture free. A license that says, I as a musician give you the right to sample my work, take and build, create, remix. And the most important place where that conversation began was here in Brazil. I come from the land where we talk about being free. I come from a land where we are lost. You are our brother in this debate, and you must remind us of what we have lost.
Lessig found an ally in Gilberto Gil, one of the country's most famous musicians, who was also the Minister of Culture. He's devoted his entire life to creating a society based on sharing.
Uns me pegam para criar em livros, outros me botam em um vestido lindo, cheio de notas musicais, e eu fico morando dentro da música.
We are always finding ways to, give young people opportunities for them to access. O compartilhamento é a própria natureza da criação. Não há criação isolada. Ninguém é um criador sozinho, ninguém cria nada no vácuo. Tudo já vem de alguma coisa que já foi criada antes. É uma cadeia que vai se processando. Com música, com literatura, com cinema que você está fazendo aqui agora. Quantos antes tiveram que botar uma câmera na mão para fazer o que você está fazendo aqui?
Everything uploaded online, images, audio, video, is automatically covered by copyright laws. The way forward for teachers is through open educational practices, OEPs. In other words, the creation and sharing of resources, open educational resources, OERs, using Creative Commons licenses. These increase the flexibility of copyright by expressing how we wish our work to be used.
Here's a country fighting to overcome a legacy of violence, corruption, and inequality through innovation based on universal access to human knowledge and the freedom to build with it, with a balanced view of intellectual property and its relation to the public domain. What could humanity accomplish if we all played the game like Brazil? What diseases could be cured? What voices might be heard? What songs could we sing? Given the chance, this could be what the whole world would look like. Or the world might look more like this. A completely private, incorporated domain. A world where in order to create, you need to beg permission from those who are powerful enough to lock up the ideas from the last century. Is this where we're headed?
Open educational practices help teachers and learners to raise their voice and influence how internet law can protect all of us, not just the interests of large corporations.
Culture always builds on the past, but the past will always try to control the future. Our future is becoming less free, and to build free societies, we need to limit the control of the past. This is only the beginning of this movie. Build on the past. That's the future.
I hope you found that interesting. Please do feel free to pop your comments in the chat or to switch on your mic, and perhaps we can have a little conversation around the importance of collaboration and creativity, particularly when it comes to facing the might of the all-powerful corporations and vested interests, which might wish to restrict our creativity. I will just add some more links into the chat. An important one perhaps for those of you certainly looking for further networks to connect with, and that's one based in the Netherlands. That's the Media and Learning Organization. They have a very useful set of resources and regularly organize webinars to support people using media and video in teaching and learning. And one here that is actually from the Teaching English organization, which is a little video guide for teachers. So for those of you, and I think many of you looking at the participants list were also in my earlier session just now before the coughing started, around ethical issues of choosing tools. Hopefully you can find a pathway and find suitable networks to help you navigate the many challenges that are there for us as language teachers when it comes to creating video. And the video that I just shared with you was obviously a remix. So extracts of that were from a longer video, specifically around the development of the use of Creative Commons licensing in Brazil. This was a pre-Bolsonaro days, and obviously now we're in post-Bolsonaro days, so let's hope we pick up where we were. When Brazilian society was very committed to open practices. And clearly, if we think about how our vaccinations were developed over the pandemic, we see there was a very important role there played by open licensing in order to help all of us get through what was a very difficult time for many.